The day I received my husband's diagnosis, he suddenly installed a camera in our master bedroom. That night, I saw him swearing into his phone. "I won't touch her again. I've sent you all my account passwords, you can log in and check anytime. I've decided to stay faithful, or love." Watching his flushed, fervent face, I quietly fed the diagnosis papers into the shredder. Staying faithful, or love. Fine. Then stay faithful for the rest of your life. Chapter 1. When the letters ALS on Chad's diagnosis report came into view, my legs nearly gave out. 3 months earlier, Chad had fallen while hiking and been hospitalized. While he was there, I asked the doctor to run a full set of tests, just for peace of mind. I never imagined it would lead to a result like this. ALS has no cure at present, the doctor said. Medication can only slow its progression. The outcome is irreversible. He looked at me with sympathy. Chad was barely in his early 30s, handsome, fit, at the peak of his career. A well-known divorce attorney, sharp and decisive, calm and rational, the very definition of elite. In private, his life was disciplined and minimal, devoted to fitness and outdoor exercise, meticulous about quality in every detail. The thought of someone like him eventually becoming completely dependent, trapped in a body that could no longer obey, was unbearable. I sat by the side of the road, watching the endless stream of passers-by, then slowly stood up. I had made my decision. If we were husband and wife, we should face everything together. No matter what he became, I would face it with him, our son and me. By the time I got home, it was already dark. My son, Evan, was quietly playing Go in his room. At 7, he had already reached an advanced level and had once been featured on a local TV program as a prodigy. "Have you eaten?" I asked gently, steadying my voice. "Yes. The housekeeper made a rib stew tonight," he said, his eyes never leaving the board. "Where's your dad?" "Out running." Evan was quiet by nature, precise with his words. "Just like the two of us." 2 hours later, I was leaning against the headboard, still debating whether to tell Chad about the diagnosis, when he came home. Dressed in black athletic wear, he looked tall and composed, sharp and efficient. I immediately grew anxious. "It's freezing outside. Why are you dressed so lightly?" One of the doctor's warnings echoed in my mind. ALS patients produce less body heat due to muscle atrophy and shouldn't be exposed to the cold, or the disease would progress faster. Chad's expression didn't change. "That's how it is when you run." He opened the box in his hands, took out a surveillance camera, and set it on the dresser across from the bed, adjusting the angle. It was pointed straight at the bed. I frowned slightly, confused. "Why did you suddenly install a camera?" I asked. "There have been some break-ins nearby. Having surveillance is safer," he replied. "Aren't you worried about privacy?" I asked hesitantly, since Chad had always been extremely particular about his own privacy. He glanced at me and gave a short, derisive laugh. "Privacy? Who would be interested in watching your privacy?" A mix of emotions churned inside me, but I didn't feel like arguing. When we went to bed, he lay down with his back to me, far away, his posture clearly signaling that he was exhausted and had no interest in talking. I let out a quiet sigh. He had just wrapped up a high-profile celebrity divorce case that had caused quite a stir, the pressure finally lifting. I decided to let him relax for now. In the middle of the night, restless and uneasy, I suddenly woke up. The space beside me was empty. Chad was gone. A wave of panic hit me, and I got up to look for him. On the balcony, he stood in the night wind, wearing only thin pajamas, speaking on the phone. I quickly grabbed a jacket and walked over. "I won't touch her again." His low voice reached me, and I froze in place. "I've sent you the passwords and account details. You can log in and check anytime. I've decided to stay faithful, or love." I stared at Chad through the glass. On his usually cold, detached face, an intense surge of emotion was playing out. Watching his flushed, animated expression, the logic of his words slowly sank in. For a moment, I felt as if I were looking at a complete stranger. Chapter 2. Chad had always had a strong sex drive. Disciplined and restrained during the day, demanding and insatiable at night. In recent years, his pressure had skyrocketed. Every word he spoke, every move he made had to be calculated and airtight, and over time, he had sealed himself into an increasingly closed-off existence. Only during those late-night moments of intimacy, when his breath was hot against my ear, desire heavy in his voice, could I glimpse the boy he once was, the one who used to blush just from looking at me. We were classmates in graduate school. He had been the one to pursue me. That aloof, proud young man reserved all his warmth for me alone, his gaze burning, his voice unsteady, and I fell quickly. Later, I stayed on to teach psychology at the university. He started as a salaried attorney and climbed his way up to partner, becoming a nationally recognized divorce lawyer with a seven-figure annual income. We were alike in many ways: emotionally stable, rational and pragmatic, calm and objective, committed to quality of life, willing to work relentlessly for our ideals. I had a steady, respectable career and could balance both family and child. He thrived professionally, soaring in his field. 8 years into our marriage, we treated each other with mutual respect and support, living in a luxury apartment, raising a low-maintenance son praised as a prodigy. By all appearances, we were a family everyone envied. But about half a year ago, something in him began to change. He had always been in the habit of running at night. He used to leave at 8 and come back at 9. After showering, he would spend half an hour with the family. Without exception. But about 6 months ago, he suddenly started leaving at 7 and not returning until 10. When he came home, he seemed exhausted, went straight to bed after showering, and our family time disappeared. I asked why his night runs had gotten so long. He pressed his lips together and said calmly, "The case is stuck. Being out helps me clear my head. Mental work can be more exhausting than physical labor." I understood. Later, he also seemed to lose interest in sex altogether. I assumed the stress was affecting his body. Afraid of hurting his pride, I didn't say anything, but I worried about him constantly. That was also why, after his fall and hospitalization, I strongly urged him to step away from work and rest properly for a while, and asked the doctor to run a comprehensive set of tests. But now it seemed the situation wasn't what I had thought at all. I lay back down, staring wide-eyed at the ceiling in the dark. What he had just said felt unfamiliar, and the expression on his face felt unreal. After suffering 2 major blows in a single day, my curiosity strangely overwhelmed what should have been grief and anger. I was genuinely curious. What kind of woman could make Chad, who had trained himself over the years to be ruthlessly rational and controlled, turn into that version of himself? I've always been a direct person. The next night, I slipped a sleeping pill into his milk. Chapter 3. He was out cold when I pressed his finger to unlock his phone. I found the number from the call he made late last night and stared at it for a long time, until something clicked in my mind. I had seen this number before. 3 months earlier, after Chad fell while hiking and was hospitalized, I asked the police for the contact information of the person who first found him and called for help, wanting to express my gratitude. This was the number they gave me. I have an excellent memory, especially for numbers. There was no way I was mistaken. When I called it back then, in front of the officer, a woman answered. Her voice was gentle and polite, with a hint of age. She softly declined meeting me and said thanks weren't necessary, that it was simply what anyone would have done. After hanging up, the officer smiled and told me that while others might accept a reward, she definitely wouldn't. I asked why. He said they recognized her during questioning. The woman had once been featured in the news as a model of resilience. She's had a hard life, he said. Her husband collapsed from a stroke at their wedding and was left completely paralyzed, along with a 7-year-old son from his previous marriage. She never left him. Took care of everything, feeding, cleaning, all of it, for 13 years, and raised that child on her own. The man passed away last year, and she finally caught a break. Now she runs a small food stand near a park, selling soup. Someone with her level of moral character would never accept your money, the officer had said. I nodded back then, sighing. My husband was really lucky to have met her. Now, in the dead of night, I sat holding my phone for a long time before opening the photo gallery. I didn't know whether Chad was too confident in himself or simply too trusting of me, but he had barely bothered to hide anything. The screen filled instantly with photos of a woman. The same woman. Under a star-filled night sky, a small food stand glowing with warm light, steam rising into the air. Her eyes were gentle, her smile bright, sometimes chopping ingredients, sometimes ladling soup, sometimes chatting with customers. Every image radiated warmth, the kind of quiet, peaceful happiness people associate with a settled life. Across hundreds of photos, her clothes shifted from light summer dresses to thick winter coats. A span of 6 months. On the third day, I went to a park on the outskirts of the city and sat down in front of the stand labeled Chloe's Soup. I watched the woman named Chloe from a short distance away. She was crouched by a flower bed, speaking softly to a stray kitten. Two men stood at the stall, joking. Chloe only has eyes for cats and dogs, she doesn't even care about making money anymore. Chloe hurried over, apologizing gently. Sorry about that, I just felt bad for them and got a little distracted. I didn't see you there. The other man waved it off. You're doing a good deed. These strays treat this place like home because they know you're soft-hearted, always hanging around for food. Honestly, scenes like this are a pleasure to watch. After the two men left, I walked up. One bowl of soup, please. Coming right up, Chloe replied with a cheerful smile as she ladled it out for me. Through the billowing steam, I studied her quietly. Mid-30s, fine lines fanning from the corners of her eyes. She didn't have the youthful allure of a young girl, but her features were soft and calm. Her hair was loosely tied back in a low ponytail, wisps falling around her face, giving her a distinctly gentle femininity. First time here, she said warmly. I'll give you a little extra to try. I sat at the small table, tasting the soup slowly. One question kept circling in my mind. A woman like Chloe, her past, her character, her temperament. Could she really do something like intrude into another woman's marriage? Could she? Chapter 4. In a blink, Chloe was sitting across from me. I paused slightly. She smiled gently, her eyes bright as she looked at me. You're Chad's wife, aren't you? I set my spoon down and met her gaze calmly. So you recognize me? She smiled slightly. I have a good memory. I saw you once on Chad's phone before, so I recognized you. I frowned, then remembered. Chad's phone wallpaper used to be a photo of me and our son. He had only switched it to a landscape image about half a year ago. She lowered her gaze, stayed silent for a few seconds, then spoke gently. I know why you're here. You probably think there's something improper between Chad and me. I said nothing. She slowly lifted her eyes, her expression warm and sincere. Anna, if you believe me, there isn't. Chad and I are completely innocent. The only contact we've had is that he sometimes stops here for a bowl of soup after his runs. As she said this, a trace of concern appeared between her brows. Later, I noticed that whenever he came by, he seemed down, hardly spoke to anyone, like he was under a lot of pressure. I tried to comfort him a few times out of kindness. I never expected, well, I think he misunderstood. He started saying things that didn't make sense. I honestly found it a little absurd. Leaving aside the fact that he's married, even if he were single, someone of his status, how could he possibly be interested in someone like me? I told him it was just a momentary impulse, but he wouldn't listen. Instead, he got worse. Sometimes he'd even call and say strange things, completely disregarding my wishes. Actually, even if you hadn't come to find me, I was planning to reach out to you myself. Chad must be under too much pressure to act this irrationally. As his wife, maybe you could help him more. I glanced at the thin layer of white fat slowly solidifying along the rim of my bowl. So what you're saying is that all of this was Chad acting on his own, and you've been trying to turn him down the whole time? Chloe let out a soft sigh and nodded slowly. I looked up at her and asked calmly, then what about him installing a camera in my master bedroom for you to watch? Was that also an impulsive move he made against your wishes? Chloe froze for a second, then quickly said, I already scolded him for that. It was completely inappropriate. I pressed on. And what about the hiking trip you took together? The one where he fell after carrying you because you said your foot hurt, was that also something he forced you into against your will? Chloe's pupils widened, and she stood up abruptly. Hiking? I don't know what you're talking about. I looked at her coldly. Didn't you say you have a good memory? I even called you afterward to thank you. You forgot that quickly? Just then, a customer called out, large order, to go. Chloe pressed her lips together and hurried back to the stall, her movements stiff as she picked up the ladle. Clang. With a loud crash, the pot full of hot soup tipped over. Steaming broth and meat spilled across the ground. The scalding liquid splashed onto her. Chloe cried out, her eyes instantly reddening. The customer cursed and jumped back, muttering about bad luck as he stormed off. I looked at the mess in front of me, unwilling to get dragged into it, picked up my bag, and prepared to leave. Her eyes red, she suddenly called out. I'm sorry. I stopped and frowned at her. She stood there in disarray, sobbing softly. I'm sorry. I did keep this from you, she said softly. That day I was upset because my stepson had gotten into a fight. Chad happened to stop by and said hiking might help clear my head, so I went with him. After he fell down the mountain, I was terrified. I called the police, but I didn't dare come see you, I was afraid you'd misunderstand. Her eyes were rimmed red, tears streaming down her face. Her hands, splashed by the hot soup earlier, were already blistering, making her look pitiful beyond words. Anna, what do you think you're doing? A furious shout came from behind me. I turned to see Chad charging toward us from a distance, his face twisted with rage. For a split second, I froze. It had been a very long time, far too long, since I had seen such intense emotion on his face. He was wearing the blue suit he only put on for formal negotiations, which meant he had rushed over straight from an important meeting. In the past, even when I had been in a car accident and called him, he had insisted on finishing his negotiation before coming to the hospital. Chad glanced at the mess on the ground, then at Chloe, who was sobbing quietly. His jaw tightened as he stepped toward her, one step at a time. He lowered his head, looked at the disheveled, helpless woman in front of him, then suddenly pulled her into his arms. Are you okay? Did she hurt you? With her face buried in his chest, Chloe suddenly broke down, crying uncontrollably, her sobs full of grievance. Chad closed his eyes, his voice low and strained. Don't cry. Chloe, don't cry. Remember what you always say? We've made it through. There's nothing left worth crying over. From beginning to end. Chad never looked at me once. Chapter 5. I took out my phone and aimed it at the two of them, snapping several photos in quick succession. The sharp click-click echoed in the air. Chloe abruptly pulled away from Chad's arms and stepped back, her face full of regret and panic, as if she had only just realized what she'd done. She looked at me in a fluster and began to explain incoherently. I forgot, I didn't mean to, She couldn't finish. Because I was simply staring at her, expressionless. You don't need to say a word, Chad cut in coldly. I'll handle this. He turned to face me, and in an instant, the familiar composed, unflappable expression of a seasoned divorce attorney returned to his face. Anna, whatever this is, we'll talk at home. This park's right next to your university, students are coming and going. Causing a scene here only makes you look bad. Besides. His gaze dropped to the mess on the ground. What do you get out of going after a woman who's on her own? I looked at him coolly, my voice steady. You know there are students all over this place. And here you are, my husband, holding a widow like that in public. What, does that get you off? Chad's gaze tightened, shock flickering beneath his anger. After all, in front of him, I had always been gentle, elegant, composed. He had never seen this side of me. Neither had I. Right now, I wouldn't be wrong to slap the both of you, I said evenly. But I won't let someone else dump their filth on me. I turned to Chloe, who was silently cleaning up. Chloe, so if you're not saying anything, are you actually planning to let this play out that way? She flinched, then a few seconds later slowly lifted her chin and said loudly, enough. Stop arguing. It wasn't her. I knocked it over myself. Is that good enough? Her eyes were red as she looked at Chad, her voice full of grievance. Now please take your wife and leave. Don't affect my business. I won't be doing business with you anymore either. Please don't come back. Customers began to gather nearby. What's going on here? How did it turn into this? Chloe, did someone bully you? Who was it? Whoever dared mess with Chloe will have to answer to me. Unfriendly looks turned toward me from every direction. Chad's expression darkened. He grabbed my wrist and pulled me toward the parking lot. I couldn't break free and had no choice but to follow. On the way, a few students I recognized passed by, a ball tucked under one of their arms, grinning as they greeted me. Hi, Professor. I smiled and nodded. Hello. Chapter 6. Once we reached the parking lot, I yanked my hand free and walked calmly toward my car. The trees on either side blurred past as I drove down the main road, and finally, the tears I'd been holding back spilled over. I gave myself half an hour. Anger. Pain. Acceptance. Calm. Then I turned the wheel and drove to the bank. Chad and I shared a joint account. Both of our salaries, bonuses, and investment returns went into it. When we first opened it, he had smiled and said, "You're always saying I'm bad at expressing myself. From now on, you'll manage this account. I'll just keep putting money into it, consider it security for you and our son." Does that count as expression? Over the years, the balance had grown to over 18 million. The bank clerk looked at me, puzzled. This account was frozen due to a guarantee default. You didn't know? My hands and feet went cold. I asked slowly, when did this happen? 2 months ago. 2 months ago. He had just recovered and been discharged from the hospital. I, on the other hand, had collapsed from exhaustion after caring for him, running a high fever for an entire week. While I was burning up and barely conscious, he had already been laying the groundwork, securing the upper hand in a divorce and asset dispute. The irony made me want to laugh. On the way here, I had even regretted being too impulsive, playing my hand too early without setting up an exit strategy. But it turned out he had started calculating against me long ago. So it turned out he had been plotting against me all along. When a man's heart changes, he can be ruthless beyond imagination. By the time I got home, it was fully dark. Chad was sitting on the sofa in his loungewear, drinking tea, his expression perfectly calm. He glanced at me. I sent Evan to my mother's place. Let's settle this once and for all. I sat down and looked at him in silence. He took a sip of tea and spoke slowly. I originally planned to talk about this later. After all, I did feel a bit reluctant. I wanted you and Evan to enjoy a little more happiness while it lasted. But since you chose to make a scene today, I might as well go along with it. Anna, I've fallen in love with someone else. Let's get divorced. I was extraordinarily calm. I even gave him a faint smile. Chad, can you tell me what it is about her that made you betray 10 years of marriage and choose to abandon your wife and child? He frowned slightly. If you insist on a clear answer. After a brief silence, he spoke again, his tone gentle and almost sentimental. These past few years, because of my work, I've seen far too much scheming and deception in marriage. I lost any normal understanding or judgment about love a long time ago. But after meeting her, I realized there are still women like that, women who can give up the best years of their lives purely out of love and responsibility, without hesitation. She brought life back into my suffocating, stagnant existence. You ask what I love about her? I've asked myself that countless times. Her gentleness. Her kindness. Her strength. Life dealt her endless hardship, yet she still managed to bloom out of the mud. And every cold night, the bowl of hot soup she handed me. When he finished this long speech, emotion surged across his face, as if he had deeply moved himself. The room fell into silence. After a long moment, I let out a quiet scoff. So the soup the housekeeper makes isn't warm enough? You had to go outside for that extra bite of filth? Chad stiffened, his face instantly turning cold. Anna, you're selfish. You'd never understand this kind of love. I nodded. In that case, you leave with nothing, and I'll agree to the divorce. A clear trace of mockery appeared on his face. Leaving with nothing? Let's not even get into the fact that there's no such thing legally. Even if there were, and let's be generous here, Chloe and I never crossed any physical lines. I'm not even the party at fault. I stared at him, silent for a long time. Could a person really change this completely? Turn cold and heartless, as if his soul had been replaced overnight? Chad seemed to read my thoughts and drew his brows together slightly. You don't need to look at me like that. When feelings are gone, divorce is only natural. When I was lying there waiting for rescue after falling on the mountain, I figured it out, life is short. I don't want to live timidly, afraid to love. Even if I have to bear condemnation and disgrace, I want to truly live for once. And Anna, don't forget what I do for a living. I have plenty of ways to handle this. It's just a question of whether I choose to use them on you. I laughed softly. Not use them on me? Haven't you already? Freezing the account, such a filthy trick. Doesn't it feel like an insult to your noble, your love? He glanced at me and said coolly, so you checked the account. That's nothing, just standard procedure. It's only to keep the divorce from getting complicated. I've already drafted the divorce agreement, he said. The money and the child go to me. The house goes to you, of course, you'll be responsible for the remaining mortgage. From the standpoint of financial contribution to the family, this is already more than generous. Thud. I grabbed the ashtray off the table and hurled it at him. He clutched his forehead. Bright red blood streamed through his fingers. Chapter 7. Are you insane? Shocked and furious, he stared at the blood pouring down, grabbed his car keys, and rushed out without looking back. I slowly sat down, picked up the teapot, and poured myself a cup of tea. In just 3 days, my life had been completely dismantled. After leaving the bank, I finally realized that Chad had turned the tactics he'd perfected over the years on me. I was probably more unfortunate than most women. Not only betrayed emotionally, but married to a professional divorce attorney. Over the years, he had trained himself to be ruthless, to operate solely on calculations of interest. If I continued to drown in pointless grief and pain, I would be destroyed without a trace. I had to deal with this the way he would. So before coming home, I had already gone to my mother-in-law's place to pick up Evan and temporarily placed him with a Go instructor we trusted. I sat there in silence, cup after cup of tea passing through my hands. Outside the window, at some point, a full moon had quietly risen into the sky. After a long while, I stood up and went into the bedroom, taking out the diagnosis report. As I focused on it, my phone vibrated. Chad had sent me a photo. In the image, his forehead was already bandaged. His eyes were closed as he lay with his head resting on a woman's lap. A man's hand and a woman's were tightly intertwined. Below it was a single line of text. Since you didn't cherish him, I have nothing to feel guilty about anymore. It was your push that finally made me say yes. It was a notice, and a naked provocation. Someone who had clawed their way out of life's abyss had long since seen every kind of human ugliness. How could she possibly be an innocent flower growing out of the mud? Knocking over the pot that afternoon had been deliberate. Calling out to apologize and stopping me as I was about to leave had also been deliberate. Because she had already told Chad to come. Chad understood clearly, but he never understood people. Men really are disgusting, I murmured, feeding the diagnosis report into the shredder. As the paper dissolved with a soft whirring sound, my heart finally settled. Yes. This is what I was up against. One was a model of kindness and virtue. The other, a famous, highly skilled divorce attorney. But this was a hard fight, and I was determined to see it through with him. The marriage would end. That was inevitable. But the child and the money, I would not give those up. More importantly, I would make sure this infatuated man and this wronged woman were bound tightly together for the rest of their lives, never able to separate, even in death. We've made it through. That's what they believed. I made sure they hadn't. I made sure there was always another obstacle ahead, one they could never get past. Chapter 8. I rejected Chad's proposal for an amicable divorce. As a professional divorce attorney, the last thing he wanted was to resolve his own divorce through litigation. That would mean negotiations had failed, that he couldn't handle it, and it would damage his professional image. I wasn't in a hurry. Or rather, I was, but nowhere near as desperate as they were. In Chad's eyes, Chloe was radiant and untouchably pure. If she showed any initiative before their relationship was formally established, that saintly image would be stained. So she could only play hard to get. When necessary, she even had to cloak herself in righteousness, posing as the embodiment of kindness and moral virtue. As for Chad, at such a critical moment in the divorce, he couldn't afford to do anything that would make him the at-fault party. So both of them had no choice but to restrain themselves. At most, he could only stop by Chloe's stall during his nightly runs for a bowl of soup. Soup. I cradled my steaming cup of tea, watching the light snow drift outside the window. The doctor had said that ALS patients needed not only to keep warm but also to avoid high-purine foods, or the disease would progress faster. And high-purine foods mainly meant one thing: organ meats. After living at the office for a week, Chad finally came home. When he walked in, I was sorting through some clutter. A bandage was stuck to his forehead. His face was cold as he went straight into the bedroom without a word. He soon came out with a packed suitcase, then glanced at me and said icily, "I was going to leave the house to you. But your actions have completely exhausted whatever feelings we had left. So now we'll have to follow the law. With the bank account frozen, this apartment is basically our only major shared asset. So what'll it be? Do you sell it and give me half, or do you pay me my share in cash?" I tossed the photo album in my hands into a cardboard box and laughed lightly. "What, is Chloe interested in this place?" Chad gave a cold snort. "You think everyone's like you, obsessed with money? Chloe has never mentioned money to me once. Don't insult her." Then he noticed something, frowned, and walked over to pick up the album from the box. "What are you doing?" "Taking out the trash." "You?" Anger flashed across his face, then froze. He knew that photo album well. Inside were all the pictures from our college years, him secretly snapping photos of me, our first meetings, our early days of falling in love. I had once treasured it like a relic, kept it in a safe, saying we'd look through it together when we were old. Now, expressionless, I took the album from his hands and tossed it aside. A dull thud echoed through the quiet apartment. Why aren't you leaving? I reminded him. Isn't it time for your night run? He stood there with a dark expression. After a moment of silence, he turned away decisively and threw out a cold line over his shoulder. Hiding Evan won't help. He's still my son. Being with me is what will give him a better future. I'm not giving him up. With that, the door slammed shut behind him. Half an hour later, I stood up, clapped my hands together, and let out a long breath. Everything connected to him had been packed up, ready to be dumped at the trash station. So that was it, those youth-filled memories I once treated as priceless. Turns out there wasn't much to them after all. Just as I was reflecting, my phone rang. A careless young man's voice came through. This is Ryan. You were looking for me? Chapter 9. I looked at the young man sitting across from me, casually chewing gum. Purple hair, a lip ring, cold eyes, every inch of him projected a tough, rebellious air. But on closer look, on a snowy day, he was wearing a thin padded jacket, the cuffs worn pale, the zipper torn and crudely stitched back together with black thread, clearly his own handiwork. I got straight to the point. You're Ryan. Chloe's stepson? He lifted his eyes to glance at me but said nothing. I pulled out a thick stack of cash and held it out. My husband is divorcing me because of her. I need your help. Deal. He swept the money away with one arm. His immediate agreement surprised me. You're saying yes, without even asking questions? You believe me? What's there not to believe? He kept chewing, answering casually. After all, she worked so hard to raise you. Ryan spat his gum in a lazy arc, a trace of mockery flashing across his face. Instead of saying she worked hard taking care of us, you might as well say she enjoyed the image she projected to everyone else. I studied him, then pulled out another stack of cash. He swept the money away with one motion and continued, I started learning piano at 4. My dad scraped together every dollar for my lessons, and she donated the entire fund to the Red Cross in one go. When reporters came, she said other kids couldn't even afford food, that no matter how hard things were for us, they had it worse. Do you know how my dad died? An infected bedsore on his back. She did take care of him, but only the parts people could see. So you say your husband got swept up by her. I'm not surprised at all. This image of hers always manages to lure in a couple of idiots. Just didn't expect someone with your kind of background. That's a first. When Ryan left, he clenched the money in his hand and asked, so all I need to do is push her into forcing your husband to divorce you? That simple? I nodded. That simple. A divorce alone wasn't enough. It had to end exactly the way I wanted. I needed to work both angles. The next day, with light snow drifting down, I went back to Chloe's soup. Chloe was kneeling in the snow on both knees, bending down to tie the shoelaces of an elderly man leaning on a cane. The older folks nearby all gave her a thumbs up. Any family that gets a daughter-in-law like you must have accumulated 8 lifetimes of good karma. Chloe stood up, cheeks flushing as she replied modestly, with my circumstances, who would want me? As she turned, our eyes met. Her face went pale. Pressing her lips together, she walked up to me, lifting her chin slightly. Chad said if you dared come looking for me again, if you dared lay a hand on me, he'd help me sue you. I lowered my gaze. When I looked up again, anger surged, my face twisted, every inch of me looking unhinged with rage. Chloe, what did you mean by that message you sent me the other day? Are you two together now? Aren't you afraid I'll expose everything and make sure you never hold your head up again for the rest of your life? Chloe narrowed her eyes and studied me for a moment. Then she suddenly smiled and shook her head with a soft sigh. I used to think university professors were untouchable, so impressive, so formidable. But now that I'm closer, I see you're no different from the women who throw tantrums in the street. She looked at me gently, almost compassionately. A person's heart shapes the world they see. I did agree to him. After all, he placed a burning, sincere heart in front of me. No woman could remain unmoved by love that earnest. Chad is such an outstanding man, carrying so much pressure, yet receiving not a trace of warmth at home. You truly don't know how to cherish what you have. But I'm not as dirty as you imagine. Even though I agreed under unavoidable circumstances, I would never cross any line with him while he still has a family. This is who I am. If he comes, I'm here. If he doesn't, I'm still here. That's all. I raised my voice. Don't think I don't know what you're after. You just want his money. Otherwise, why would he insist on fighting me over assets before agreeing to the divorce? She smiled faintly, clearly unwilling to argue further. Everyone knows that the thing I, Chloe, value least is money. Otherwise, over the past 13 years, I would have had countless chances to marry into wealth. The only thing that ever moves me is sincerity. I laughed coldly, dripping with sarcasm. That sounds lovely. If he loves you so much, why doesn't he hurry up and divorce me to marry you? The only explanation is that money matters more to him than you do. For the first time, that serene, tranquil expression cracked. His sincerity, she said stiffly, is something I know in my own heart. That's enough. I smiled, pleased beyond measure. True love? I shot back. If you really have the guts, make him leave with nothing. If he's willing to give up every cent just to be with you, then I'll believe he truly loves you. Otherwise, it's all bullshit, just excuses for a cheating man and a shameless woman. The muscles in Chloe's cheeks twitched. She pressed her lips together for a long moment before looking straight at me and saying, word by word, and what if he can do it? I laughed loudly, completely unabashed. Then I'll personally deliver a wedding gift to your ceremony and let everyone know that even I, the ex-wife, was moved by your love. By then, your image, Chloe, will shine even brighter and more glorious than ever. As my voice rose and fell with deliberate emphasis, a light slowly surfaced in Chloe's eyes. I knew it. Her endorphins. Her dopamine. They had started to stir. Chapter 10. The city was buried under heavy snow for several days, traffic grinding to a halt. Chloe's stall had to close temporarily. The people who were already drunk on emotion weren't about to be stopped by something as trivial as bad weather. Using his habit of drinking her soup as an excuse, Chad trudged through snow and freezing wind every evening after work, walking half an hour to Chloe's place. To drink soup. In fact, the harsher the weather and the longer the distance, the more intense and exhilarating these meetings became for them. Chad sat at the dining table while Chloe bustled about just for him alone. From time to time, they exchanged smiles, the scene warm and intimate, lamplight glowing softly, a picture of domestic bliss. All of this, I watched through the camera. A few days earlier, Ryan had sent me a receipt. Reimbursement. I asked for what? Irritated, he replied, I don't feel like telling you their story. I bought a camera and installed it. Watch it yourself. It's my dad's house, I can install whatever I want. I considered it briefly, then agreed. Chad was meticulous and calculating, a man of layers and defenses. Only in front of Chloe did he lose all restraint, like an old house suddenly catching fire, reason collapsing in an instant. To know the enemy is to control the tempo. Besides, this was nothing more than returning the favor in kind. One day, just as the atmosphere was perfect, one of them bent over a bowl of soup, the other propping her chin and gazing at him, Ryan burst through the door with earth-shattering force. His brows knit as he blurted out, so you're the wild man. Their faces changed instantly. Chloe hurried to explain gently. Chad said in a low voice that he was just a customer there for soup. Ryan let out a snort. In weather like this, you come over every single day just to drink soup? You'd die if you skipped it? I thought the neighbors were talking nonsense. Why are you two panicking? If you're together, what's so hard to admit? It's just men and women doing what men and women do. As he spoke, he gave Chad a suspicious look. Wait. Are you running a pig butchering scam? Chad's face darkened. I'm a lawyer. So you're a married man? Chad's face went pale again. I'm just here for the soup. Ryan exploded. Holy shit, are you seriously trying to mess with my stepmom? Get the fuck out of here. You've got a wife and you're still chasing a widow? What the hell is wrong with you? I'll kick your ass. He lunged forward as if to swing. Chloe screamed and rushed to pull him back. The front door was wide open. With heavy snow outside, everyone was bored and staying home. Neighbors had already gathered to watch. People chimed in one after another. Chloe, don't get fooled. These scammers all look respectable nowadays. Remember a few years ago? That guy who used to come all the time, you thought he was some kind-hearted donor, then his wife showed up and caused a huge scene. Don't get tricked again. Seeing this, Chloe smiled and explained that Chad was indeed just a customer there for soup, that Ryan had misunderstood. After that incident, Chad became more cautious. He stopped going every day, and even when he did show up, it was furtive, as if sneaking around. The longing between them only deepened. Every meeting was charged, just one look exchanged, and they could freeze there, gazing at each other for ages. As for me, I sent Chad a revised version of the divorce agreement. He replied with just 3 words. Not possible. One day, through the camera, Chloe suddenly told Chad she was leaving the city. Chad was stunned. Why would you leave? Chloe's eyes were red. Ryan's grown up now. It's not appropriate for us to keep living together like this. I don't have a home in this city. I can only go back to my hometown. My aunt has introduced me to a widower there. He's in his early 50s, but with my circumstances, I can only. No. Chad snapped. A man like that isn't worthy of you. You're not allowed to marry anyone else. You can only marry me. Tears streamed down Chloe's face. You're still married. Chloe, will never be the kind of woman who destroys someone else's family. Chad, let it go. Let's just say we were fated to meet, but not to be together. Chad said firmly, Chloe, wait for me. How could I ever let you be a mistress? I will divorce her. You just don't understand, if I want to secure more favorable terms, I can't rush it. Chloe suddenly stood up, choking back sobs as she raised her voice. Aren't you a divorce lawyer? How can you not get divorced? Didn't you say you make $20 million a year? Why are you still fighting over that bit of money? I don't understand all your schemes. I don't want money, I want real love. Or do you really value money more than me? If that's the case, leave. You're not worthy of my sincerity. Chad texted me. The house goes to you. I take the money and the child. I replied, I want all of it. Don't push it too far. Then we'll drag this out. The next time Chad appeared on the camera, it was at night. Chloe had just finished showering. Her hair hung damp against her shoulders, and in the warm room she wore a thin, slightly sheer nightgown. Her face was cold. She didn't say a word to Chad, but she kept bending down, head lowered, serving him soup and food again and again. Chad's gaze stayed glued to her the entire time. At one point, he lost control and reached for her hand, only for her to fling it away in shock. What do you take me for? She said sharply. Chad, this is the last time I'm making soup for you. Next month I'm going back to my hometown to go on blind dates. You don't need to come here anymore. That night, Chad sat in silence in the living room for a long time. The house and the money go to you. I take the child. I was quiet for a moment. Let Evan decide who he wants to be with. Fine. Your words. Don't go back on them. There was certainty in Chad's tone. I stared out at the clear sky after the snowstorm. My chest tightened slightly. Chapter 11. When it came to Evan, I didn't actually have much confidence. At 3, he had a photographic memory. At 5, he started learning Go. At 7, he earned the title of a prodigy. He had always been different from other children. He never cried or clung. Though I handled his daily needs, he was never especially attached to me. As a psychology professor, I had deliberately looked into cases like his. Children like this, whose cognitive functions develop early and intensely, often lag behind others when it comes to emotional needs and expression. To him, there didn't seem to be much difference between me, Chad, or the housekeeper. After I placed Evan with his Go instructor, whenever I went to see him, he remained distant, fully absorbed in the board. On the day of Evan's competition, I dropped him off at the venue and then went to the university. By the time I returned, Evan had already defeated his opponent in remarkably little time and was giving an interview. I saw Chad and my mother-in-law. She was holding Evan's hand, smiling so broadly she could barely contain it. Chad was speaking confidently into the camera. The celebrity divorce case that had first made his name was largely because the client had recognized him as the father of a prodigy and chosen to trust him. After that, Chad became Evan's default spokesperson in interviews, which brought him a steady stream of clients. When the interview ended, Chad turned to say something to his mother first, then walked toward me. Anna, for the sake of our years together, I've already compromised on the money and the house. Of course, that sum means a lot to you, but to me it's nothing more than a year's income. Evan will have a much better future with me than with you. I clenched my teeth and smiled faintly. Did Evan say he chose you? He snorted, then shifted slightly to the side, letting me see Evan walking toward the car hand in hand with his grandmother. What do you think? My body stiffened, my nails nearly digging into my palms. Then the car door opened. Evan got out with his backpack on, while my mother-in-law called after him in a fluster. With the steady stride of a little adult, he walked straight up to me, looked up, and said, "I just went to Dad's car to get my backpack back." "Mom, you're late." I steadied myself and spoke slowly. "Yes. I'm sorry, I came late. I didn't expect you to win so quickly. You were amazing." Chad's face darkened with fury. Lowering his voice, he said, "Evan, come with Dad. I've arranged for a national-level master to coach you." Evan remained calm. "But you're divorcing Mom, aren't you?" he said. "Then I can't go with you and Grandma." With that, he took my slightly trembling hand. "Let's go, Mom. I need to get back soon, there's another match tomorrow." I lifted my chin just a little. "All right, my son." Chad stood there frozen, his expression ugly beyond words. In the car, I suppressed my shock and emotion and chose my words carefully. "Evan, do you really understand what it means for Mom and Dad to get divorced?" Seated in the back, he answered in a young but steady voice, "Yes." "Are you sad?" "My teacher says you should never be sad over the empty spaces you lose on the board." My eyes instantly filled with tears. I had always thought he didn't understand love or feelings. I was wrong. Not expressing them didn't mean he didn't understand. For someone truly strong, the most precious energy is always devoted to what's right in front of them. When the environment favors him, he doesn't overproject. And when it changes, he can assess it instantly and make a choice. My son, Evan. A born strategist. Chapter 12. When Chloe once again threw herself into Chad's arms, wearing that sheer nightgown, eyes red as she cried a farewell, Chad finally lost control. Almost violently, he tore apart the flimsy dress that barely covered her. He lifted Chloe, limp as water, into his arms and carried her, step by step, into the bedroom. I exited the camera feed. Ryan didn't let it go. He messaged me. "Your husband's been in that room for a full day and night. Want me to help you catch them in the act?" No. At this point you don't want to vent a little? You really want to let those two run off happily together? You don't get it. They have to be together, for me to feel satisfied. 2 days later, Chad and I finalized the divorce. The house, the money, and our son, all went to me. He left with nothing, yet looked radiant. Of course he did. After holding back for over half a year, one release was bound to feel like rain after a long drought. As we stepped out of the courthouse, he gave me a cold, sideways glance. "Anna, do you really think you've won? You probably don't know this, but next year my firm is expanding. We're bringing in new partners. My share will double. In other words, the money you fought so hard for doesn't even equal 1 year of my income. As for Evan, he's young and doesn't understand yet. When he grows up, he'll naturally know who can help him more. When that time comes, do you really think you can keep him by your side?" After saying this, his legs suddenly gave out and he stumbled, falling flat on the ground. He scrambled up awkwardly and looked at his shoe in confusion. I watched him quietly and smiled. "Then congratulations, if you live long enough to enjoy it." He frowned, about to say something else. I turned and walked away without looking back. Not long after, Ryan deliberately burst in with a few friends, while the two of them were completely lost in passion. He snapped photos furiously and shouted threats of violence. Humiliated beyond measure, Chad had no choice but to pull out the last $300,000 he had saved under the table to buy their silence. Crying, Chloe insisted they had to get married immediately and make it a grand affair, otherwise those thugs would spread rumors and cause trouble everywhere. Later, Chad mortgaged his law firm shares to take out a $5 million loan. Part of it went toward a 20% down payment on an apartment for Chloe, the rest was used to stage an extravagant wedding. Before the wedding, Chloe messaged me. "Little sister, do your words still count?" The message was laced with mockery and triumph. I replied, "They do." On the wedding day, a piece of news suddenly went viral online. The headline read, "Famous divorce lawyer leaves with nothing for love." The comment section exploded. "Oh my God, this is unexpectedly so romantic. Giving up a lifetime of expertise just to be with you. Isn't this that most resilient woman? She's finally endured her suffering and found love." Exactly. She has morals and principles. He divorced and left with nothing before pursuing love, there's nothing to criticize. But doesn't the original wife seem kind of pitiful? Pitiful? I'm jealous. She got the money and the house and walked away from a man who didn't love her. Isn't that a win? No matter how you look at it, a professional divorce lawyer giving up what he's best at for love. If that's not love, what is? That day, at the emotional peak of the ceremony, Chloe wiped away her tears and declared, "We've made it through." Thunderous applause erupted. Every guest rose to bless the newlyweds. Including me. Chapter 13. Half a year later. While driving Evan to the Go Academy one day, traffic backed up near the hospital entrance. That was when I saw Chad and Chloe. They were sitting by a roadside flower bed, report folders in their hands, both staring ahead with blank, hollow expressions. Chloe suddenly jumped to her feet and screamed, "It's the same result. It wasn't a mistake. Why is my life so miserable?" After shouting, she ran off in a daze. Chad didn't lift his head. He stood there motionless, staring fixedly at the ground beneath his feet. A moment later, Ryan appeared out of nowhere. He strode over, grabbed Chad by the collar, and swung a hard punch. Chad went down without the slightest resistance. Ryan roared, "Didn't you say 20,000 a month? You've missed 2 months already. Are you trying to make me leak all those photos and videos?" Chad slowly got back on his feet, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and said quietly, "There's no money anymore. I'm not paying you again. Do whatever you want." Ryan snapped, "No money? Aren't you the boss? Don't you get profit shares? Who do you think you're fooling?" Chad tilted his head back and looked silently at the sky. "I'm sick. ALS. The partners pulled out the moment they found out. The value of my shares was just enough to pay back the $5 million loan. I can't work anymore. I have no income." Ryan stared at him in disbelief. "Not a cent left?" Chad gave a bitter, self-mocking smile. "If I weren't sick, that money would mean nothing. But now." He didn't finish the sentence. A tear slid down from the corner of his eye. The car window behind us suddenly rolled down. I turned my head. Evan was looking out the window and called out, "Dad." Chad saw us, his body jolting. He lowered his head and choked out, "Evan, Anna, I'm sick. I really miss you both." "Dad," Evan said calmly, "your collar." Chad lifted his tear-streaked face, confused. "What?" "There's a lump of dog poop on it." After saying that, Evan pressed the window button and the glass slid back up. Outside the car window was Chad's face, desperate, helpless. Chapter 14. For a long time after that, I deliberately stopped paying attention to Chad and Chloe. Once the gears of fate begin to turn, the ending is already set. Until one day, after Evan and I finished dinner, one of the new dishes our housekeeper had just learned, we were sitting in the living room chatting to help digestion. I had changed my approach to Evan's upbringing. Beyond go, I wanted him to experience life more fully. He thought for a moment, then asked me, "Mom, do you feel lonely?" I almost laughed, then nodded slowly. "Yes. I want you to spend more time with me." He considered it, then agreed. From then on, instead of retreating to his room right after meals, he stayed with me to talk or watch some television. When Chloe's face appeared on the news, I froze. She looked like a completely different person. Her face was drawn and exhausted, her eyes dulled with fatigue, cheekbones sharply protruding, lips so thin they bordered on cruel. She was wiping away tears as she faced the reporters. "My life has been unlucky. One husband was paralyzed, and now this husband has ALS. I hope society can offer me a bit more help." The camera shifted, focusing on a bed inside a cramped, shabby room. A man lay motionless on it, staring at the ceiling. It was Chad, so thin he was almost unrecognizable. The reporter spoke with passionate fervor into the camera. "No matter what, Chloe's strength of spirit deserves our admiration. She and her husband came together because of love. Back then, her husband sacrificed everything to choose her, and now, in the face of hardship, she has not abandoned him." Evan stared at the man on the television. "Mom, I want to go see Dad." I agreed. 2 days later, when we found the address shown on TV, I was startled. It was an old building so dilapidated it was nearly unsafe, worse even than Chloe's previous place. Holding Evan's hand, I went up to the second floor. The door was wide open. No one was there. The furniture was crude and worn, clutter piled everywhere. Just as I began to wonder if we had the wrong place, a gurgling sound came from the bed in the corner of the room. Chad's eyes were wide open, staring straight at us. I led Evan over. His eyes immediately reddened, and cloudy tears streamed down his face as he made muffled sounds. Son, son, son. I looked at him in silence. His eyes were sunken, his body reduced to skin and bones. The once sharp, intelligent gaze now looked murky and dim. His hair was unevenly hacked, clearly cut at random with scissors. The front of his shirt was half-soaked, stuck with bits of green vegetables and grains of rice. For a moment, I could hardly believe this was the same Chad who once obsessed over his appearance to the point of near perfection. He stared at me without blinking. In his eyes churned pain, sorrow, regret, despair. I steadied myself and spoke. Evan said he wanted to see you. So I brought him. Evan took a thick wad of cash from his backpack. Dad, this is my New Year's money. I want to give it to you, he said seriously. What's the use of giving it to him? In the end, he still depends on me. Chloe sneered as she walked in, snatching the money from Evan's hands and quickly counting it. 20,000? She shot me a resentful look. Isn't that a bit too little? He left you more than 20 million. I looked at her calmly. What about the 5 million back then? Didn't he buy you a house? Chloe let out a scornful laugh. That house? Only 20% was paid as the down payment. He's lying there unable to move, how could I possibly keep paying the mortgage? I sold it and bought this one. At least I have somewhere to live. The remaining 800,000 is in the bank, interest is just over 1,800 a month. Together with the neighborhood subsidies, it's barely enough to get by. Anna, for the sake of the fact that he's your child's father, shouldn't you give some of the money back? I laughed. Isn't it enough to live on already? Didn't you say the thing you cared least about was money? When you fall on hard times, you come to me for money. If I were the one in trouble, would either of you give me a single dollar? Then I turned to Chad, who had been silently crying the whole time, and spoke calmly. Back then, you swore over the phone that you would stay chaste for love. You did, and you can keep it up for the rest of your life. You admired Chloe for staying loyal and caring for a disabled husband, and now you get to experience it yourself, the exact same treatment. Chad, you got exactly what you asked for. So what, exactly, are you crying about? Chad's entire body began to shake, a long, broken wail tearing out of his throat. I took Evan's hand and walked out without looking back. The car rolled steadily down the main road. After a moment of silence, I asked Evan, do you resent Mom for treating your dad that way? Evan shook his head. No. My teacher says, when you place a stone, you must have no regrets. If you're not clear-headed when you make a move, one mistake can cost you the entire board. I let out a quiet breath, then suddenly thought of something and asked, half joking but a little nervous. Son, when you grow up, don't become one of those men who only realize what they've lost after it's too late. The kind who push their wife away, then spend the rest of their life regretting it. That kind of ending is miserable. I don't know why, but I've always felt he had the potential for it in certain ways. Evan looked puzzled. Why would realizing something too late mean you die? I was momentarily speechless, not knowing how to explain. Evan processed it on his own. I understand now. You mean like Dad, right? Don't worry, Mom. I won't. I'm the one who holds the pieces. The one who holds the pieces? I asked, confused. Evan's voice was calm and certain. The one who holds the pieces is always responsible for every move. Once a move is made, it can never be taken back. Even though I didn't fully understand it. I believed him. After all, my son Evan is a true master. At this point, my love life is a public service announcement. Free of charge.